Hi, my name is Aubrey Groff, and I am going to do my cultural perspectives presentation on the Muslim and Islamic culture. So, most of the information that I found is from the Journal of Multicultural Counseling and Development in an article called Grief Counseling for Muslim Preschool and Elementary School Children. It's written by Baggerly and Abugdilari. So the first thing that's really important to remember is that the Muslim population is growing very fast, especially in America. So our counselors and people that know that they might be dealing with people in this culture, and especially with loss, really need to know about the culture in order to help these people in the correct way. So another important thing is that not all Muslims practice the exact same way. There are two types of Muslims, the Shiite and the Sunni Muslims, and they could have different customs, but in my paper or in my presentation, I'll be covering just the general Muslim population. So the view of death that the Muslims have, is that the death is the will of their God, called Allah. So they believe that the soul is being returned to God. So their whole life is the purpose of their life is to please Allah, and that they believe that Allah chooses when they die. And so they really are forced to accept this death because it revolves around their God purposely taking their loved ones away from them. So not only is their death Allah's will, but their life is also Allah's will. So in their life, they practice a lot of good deeds in order so that they will receive eternal life. Some more information that I found is from a New Zealand website called the Memory Tree. And so this website stated that the Muslim people, they shape their soul for when they are dead whenever they're still alive, so that their life could make their soul after they die better or worse. So they really have to be prepared for death at any time. And this is why the daily prayer is so important. The Muslim people pray 5 times a day. And a lot of this is so that whenever they die, they will receive eternal life from Allah. So the mourning rituals that the Muslim have, the mourning period is typically only 3 days. And so after 3 days, they're expected to return to their normal life. They can still be sad and upset and things because that is just natural to be, but they're expected to go back to regular life after 3 days. And crying is acceptable in this culture, but wailing and screaming and showing their sorrow in that way isn't accepted because it shows that they aren't pleased with Allah taking their loved one away from them. So other Muslim cultures also believe that wailing and screaming and crying in that way can cause the deceased people to suffer. So then the burial rituals that the Muslims have is that the body is very quickly buried after the person dies. So they wash the body, they leave it in a natural state, which I found very interesting because in all of the death that I've seen, when there is an open casket at a funeral, the body is really prepared to look like it would still be living. So there's a lot of makeup and enhancement in that sort of way. But in the Muslim culture, that's not the case. They leave it just as it is. It's just cleaned. And the funerals are often held within 24 hours, which I also found interesting because in my culture, I know that there's a few days between the death and the funeral because there could be people coming in from out of town and all sorts of stuff. So with it being in 24 hours, if there are family and friends out of town that would want to come, the odds are that they wouldn't be able to make it to the funeral. Another interesting thing was that the body is buried without a coffin. It's just wooden boards that surround the body so that the body isn't directly touching the earth because they feel that is not natural. The body is also wrapped in a white cloth and it's faced towards the city of Mecca. So Mecca is the Muslims' holiest city. And so if their body cannot be faced that way, then they will move their head so that it is faced towards Mecca. Another really interesting thing that I found is that the graveyard where the body is placed, women are not allowed to go there. So women aren't allowed to go to the burial. And I couldn't find a ton of information on this, so this may not be true in the American Muslim culture, but in the Islamic culture, women are not allowed to go there. It's only a place for men, even the day of the burial and then all the days following. Another thing is that the cremation is not allowed for the Islamic people, so the bodies are always just buried as they are. So the healing process, like I said, it just is supposed to last about 3 days. And so to help them heal, many Muslims do meaningful things so that they can remember their loved ones that have passed away. So they do things like write or read poetry. They read their holy book, which is called the Quran. And they do acts to benefit the dead. So they do things in honor of the people that they have lost. So with the Muslim people, counseling is actually not usually sought because they feel that counseling is a place for people with real serious mental health problems, and they really have a negative connotation with counseling. And that's something that I found for the Islamic people, but in the American Muslim culture, it could be a little bit more common that they seek counseling, but I don't think it's as common as would be in the Western culture. So it's really important to remember that in every defined culture, there are going to be differences. Not every family is going to do anything the exact same way. It's really just what they want for themselves and their family and the lost. So I think that that's really interesting because remembering that not every family is going to mourn the same way, you have to remember in order to help a family in the correct way, it's okay to ask, what do you do whenever you lose a loved one or something like that. So I found it interesting in an article called The Narratives on Death and Bereavement from 3 South African cultures, they stated that grief doesn't exist in other cultures besides the American culture. It's only a part of the Western death, which I don't necessarily totally agree with. It could depend on the person's definition of grief, because like in the Muslim culture, like I said, they're only supposed to mourn for 3 days. But in my mind, I kind of associate grief with being, screaming and wailing and upset to the point where it kind of consumes your life for a period of time. The article also said that Americans and Europeans are said to be less emotional and they don't cry as much as other cultures. This I also don't totally agree with because after finding out more about the Muslim culture, it really said that they're really only able to be upset for a few days and they aren't allowed to scream and cry because that would go against Allah. And they want to do everything to please Allah. So I just found it interesting that a couple of the things I found before I found all the information on the Muslim culture kind of counteracted with the things I did find. But that is my presentation on the Muslim culture, and I hope that you learned some things. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.